Sasha Obama's humiliation at the airport. It was an early morning at Washington, D.C.'s Reagan National Airport, with the sky painted in hues of orange and pink as the sun barely crept over the horizon. Sasha Obama, now 21 years old, was on a journey that wasn't just about a flight to New York. It was about proving herself. She had been invited to present her research at a prestigious youth conference in the city, a significant achievement, and one that had been earned through years of hard work and dedication. Sasha had grown accustomed to walking in the shadow of her famous family, but this moment was different. This moment was about her voice, her ideas, and her achievements. She was determined to carve out an identity of her own, one that wasn't defined by her last name, but by her passion for her work. The night before, her father, Barack Obama, had given her a pep talk, his words ringing in her mind as she made her way through the airport. "You're there because of your work, your dedication. Nobody can take that from you." As she walked through the busy terminal, the familiar noise of travelers rushing by, the scent of jet fuel mixing with the smell of freshly brewed coffee, she felt a mix of excitement and nerves. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, checking the time on her phone. It was just past 6:30 a.m. Her flight was in less than an hour, and the excitement of what was to come bubbled up within her. But as Sasha approached the check-in counter, that excitement began to fade, replaced by a creeping sense of discomfort. She placed her ticket and ID on the counter with a polite, "Good morning." The woman behind the desk, whose name tag read M. Reynolds, barely glanced at her before lifting an eyebrow and eyeing Sasha suspiciously. "Flying to New York?" she asked, her tone colder than expected. "Yes," Sasha replied, trying to maintain her composure. "Business class." Reynolds seemed to scrutinize Sasha's ticket with exaggerated care, her eyes flickering between it and Sasha's face. "Are you sure this is your ticket?" she asked, her voice now tinged with something Sasha couldn't quite place. Caught off guard, Sasha blinked and responded firmly, "Yes, of course, it's my ticket." But the longer Reynolds stared at the ticket, the more Sasha could feel the weight of her last name bearing down on her. It was as though the woman saw the name on the ticket and immediately questioned her right to be there. Reynolds' actions became more uncomfortable as she called over another agent, whispering something inaudible while pointing toward Sasha. The agent, a man with a stern expression, approached Sasha and inspected her ID with a level of scrutiny that felt unnecessary and invasive. "This ticket is for business class," he said, his tone almost accusing. "Are you sure this is for you?" "I'm sure," Sasha replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the mounting frustration. The agent exchanged a glance with Reynolds before nodding reluctantly, his eyes still filled with doubt. "Fine, go ahead," he muttered, waving her through with a dismissive gesture. Sasha, shaken but determined, grabbed her ticket and ID, her mind racing with confusion and irritation. It was clear that something was wrong. She moved through the terminal toward the security checkpoint, her pulse quickening as she tried to push the uncomfortable encounter out of her mind. But it wasn't over. At the security line, the tension continued to rise. The TSA agents barked their usual instructions, and passengers shuffled forward in small bursts. But as Sasha placed her bag on the conveyor belt and stepped through the metal detector, she had no idea what was coming next. The line was moving quickly, but as she reached for her belongings, a TSA agent blocked her path. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice firm. "We need to perform a secondary screening." Sasha frowned, glancing back at the conveyor belt where her bag sat untouched. "Why is there a problem?" she asked, confusion bubbling up within her. "It's just a random check," the agent replied, though his tone made it sound less like a random process and more like a deliberate action. He gestured toward a separate area, cordoned off by retractable barriers. "This way, please." Sasha followed, her irritation growing. Another agent led her into a small, secluded area and proceeded with a thorough pat-down. The screening felt invasive, as if the agent were trying to make a point rather than ensuring security. Each item in her bag was examined with unnecessary detail, and Sasha could feel the weight of the situation growing heavier with every passing second. The agent continued to ask questions that were more about her trip than about the security procedures. "Who bought your ticket?" he asked, his tone implying there was something wrong with the transaction. "I did," Sasha replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "It's for a conference." The agent smirked. Pretty fancy conference, if you're flying business class. Sasha's face flushed with indignation, but she bit her tongue. She knew that escalating the situation would only make things worse. It's a prestigious event, she said quietly, hoping to defuse the tension. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the TSA agents cleared her. But Sasha didn't feel cleared. She felt targeted. As she walked back toward the main terminal, her mind raced. She tried to shake off the anger, but the humiliation lingered like an uncomfortable weight on her shoulders. She moved toward her gate, determined not to let the morning's events derail her. But it wasn't over yet. As she neared the gate, Sasha noticed a small group of airline staff standing together, whispering and pointing in her direction. One of them, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, approached her. "Miss, I need to see your ticket and ID again," she said, her tone devoid of any courtesy. Sasha handed over her documents, her patience wearing thin. The woman inspected them with unnecessary care before speaking again. "We've been informed there may be an issue with your ticket," she said. "Please come with me." "What kind of issue?" Sasha demanded, her voice rising slightly in frustration. "Just a routine verification," the woman replied, already walking toward a side corridor. "This way, please." Sasha hesitated, her instincts telling her something wasn't right, but she followed, heart pounding. As they moved down the corridor, Sasha realized that she was being escorted further away from the gate and away from the public area. The isolation made her feel even more vulnerable. When they reached a small room at the end of the corridor, the woman stopped abruptly. "I'm sorry, but we can't allow you to board this flight," she said, her tone cold and final. "You'll need to leave the airport." Sasha was stunned. "What? Why?" she asked, struggling to process what was happening. The woman shrugged. "We have our reasons," she replied, her arms crossed. "If you don't leave willingly, we'll have security escort you out." Fury surged through Sasha. "This is unacceptable. I've done nothing wrong," she protested, her voice shaking with anger. The woman's response was cold, offering no empathy or explanation. She crossed her arms, staring Sasha down, as if to say there was no room for argument. Sasha clenched her fists, fighting back tears, but she refused to break down in front of them. She pulled out her phone and dialed the one person who could make this right. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling, "I need you." The call ended with a calm and steady reply from the other end. "I'm on my way." But those words weren't enough to quell the storm inside Sasha. She stood in the empty corridor, stranded and humiliated as she awaited her father's arrival. The silence in the corridor was almost unbearable, broken only by the distant sounds of the busy airport. The call to her father, Barack Obama. As Sasha stood alone in the dimly lit corridor of the airport, her mind was a swirl of emotions. The humiliation from the past hour weighed heavily on her, each interaction with the staff feeling like another layer of injustice added to the pile. She felt a burning anger that had been simmering ever since she was questioned at the check-in counter and escalated at security. The sense of isolation was crushing, as though the entire airport had turned its back on her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a small flicker of hope in the midst of everything. She pulled it out and saw that it was a message from her father. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Stay where you are." The assurance in his words steadied her nerves, but it couldn't entirely quell the sense of indignation building inside her. Sasha knew her father was used to dealing with pressure, to handling situations with calm authority. That steadiness was something she admired deeply in him, but it was also something she desperately needed at that moment. The emotional storm inside her had reached a peak, and though his words were meant to reassure, they didn't fully erase the feeling of being singled out, of being targeted because of who she was. "Stay where you are," the text said. But the longer she stood there, the more frustrated she became with the slow-moving injustice. Every minute that passed felt like a slap in the face. The agents' accusatory questions, the way they treated her as if she were a threat, it all compounded into an unbearable weight. She replayed the events of the morning in her mind, the suspicious looks at check-in, the invasive screenings at security, and now being told to leave the airport as if she didn't belong. Why was she being treated like this? Because of her appearance? Because of her last name? Sasha wasn't naive. She knew that people often judged her based on assumptions, based on things beyond her control. But today, it felt like those assumptions had crossed a line. Her hands were shaking as she held her phone, the screen lighting up with another incoming text. "I'll handle this." It was a simple message, but the weight of it was significant. Her father had always been a pillar of strength for her, and she needed him now more than ever. As she stood there, her mind racing with thoughts of injustice and anger, she could hear the faint sounds of the terminal beyond the corridor. The rush of passengers, the announcements over the PA system, the clattering of rolling suitcases. It felt like the world was moving on around her, as if everything was happening without her. But she was stuck in this tiny corner of the airport, waiting for someone to make it right. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it wasn't a text. She had received a call from her father. "Hi, sweetheart." His voice was calm, steady as always. "What's going on?" Sasha could feel the lump in her throat as she spoke, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and helplessness. "Dad, they're kicking me out of the airport," she said, the words feeling absurd even as they left her lips. "I've done nothing wrong, but they're treating me like I'm a criminal. They keep asking me questions about my ticket, my ID. I don't know what they want from me." Barack Obama's voice on the other end remained steady, his tone reassuring, but there was a strength to it that gave Sasha some comfort. "Stay calm, Sasha. I'm on my way. I'll take care of it." The sound of her father's voice gave her a strange sense of peace, but it didn't take away the humiliation of the moment. She stood there, leaning against the cold wall of the airport corridor, waiting. Time seemed to stretch out, each second more oppressive than the last. She glanced at the clock on her phone. Less than 15 minutes now. Despite the reassurance from her father, Sasha couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and disbelief. She had always known that being part of such a well-known family would invite a certain level of scrutiny, but this was different. This wasn't about her accomplishments or who she was as a person. It was about the assumption that because of her last name, she didn't belong. She was just another person to be scrutinized, questioned, and discarded. Her hand gripped her phone tighter as she replayed her father's words in her mind. "Stay calm." She had heard him say those words to her before, during tough moments, but this time, they didn't seem to have the same calming effect. How could she stay calm when the very people she expected to support her, to follow protocol and show respect, were doing the opposite? Her eyes moved toward the entrance of the corridor, hoping to see her father coming soon, his presence offering the hope that everything would be made right. The thought of his arrival made her feel both comforted and anxious. Comforted because she knew he would handle this with authority and dignity. Anxious because she knew the ordeal wasn't over yet. The situation was already spiraling out of control, and it felt like there was no way to bring it back down without his intervention. Sasha exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself as she leaned against the wall. She took deep breaths, trying to clear her mind. In these moments, she needed her father more than ever. She had always admired his composure under pressure. He was a man who had faced insurmountable odds, weathered the harshest storms, and come out the other side stronger. Now, it was time for him to show up, not just for her, but for the respect that had been stripped away from her in these last few minutes. The footsteps echoed down the corridor, and Sasha's heart skipped a beat. She turned, her breath catching in her throat, hoping, praying that it was him. The sound of those footsteps, calm, steady, and purposeful, was all she needed to feel a sense of relief flood through her. It was him. It was Barack Obama. Her father was here. And with that, Sasha knew everything was about to change. Barack Obama's intervention. The moment Sasha heard the familiar rhythm of her father's footsteps approaching, a wave of relief washed over her. The tension that had built up in her chest over the last hour slowly began to ease. She stood up straighter, pushing away the feeling of vulnerability that had threatened to overwhelm her. There was something profoundly reassuring about Barack Obama's presence, a steadying force, a reminder that things could be made right, no matter how dire they seemed. Her father appeared at the end of the narrow corridor, his tall figure easily recognizable, his face marked with a calm determination. Despite the chaotic nature of the situation, he walked with an unhurried confidence, as though he had all the time in the world. The security guards and airport staff, who had been so certain of their power over Sasha, straightened immediately as he entered the space. Their demeanor shifted in an instant, from cold indifference to uneasy attention. Barack's arrival was a quiet storm of authority, his calm and collected nature demanding respect without uttering a single word. Sasha watched her father as he approached her, his presence filling the corridor with an undeniable weight. She could feel the oppressive atmosphere surrounding her begin to dissipate, replaced by a strange sense of empowerment. She took a deep breath, feeling more in control than she had in the last hour. "Miss Obama," Barack said, his voice calm but firm as he turned toward her, his gaze steady and full of concern. "Are you all right?" Sasha nodded, the words still catching in her throat. She was shaken, but the moment he spoke to her, the calm reassurance she needed seemed to settle her nerves. They were going to kick me out of the airport," she said, her voice still a bit unsteady. "They've treated me like I'm some kind of criminal, Dad. I don't understand. I've done nothing wrong." Barack's gaze flickered briefly toward the airline staff and TSA agents who had been overseeing her treatment. His calm eyes did not betray his thoughts, but there was an unmistakable sharpness to his expression as he processed what she had said. "Is that so?" he asked, his voice measured, but with an edge of disbelief. "What exactly happened here?" Sasha took a moment to compose herself. The words that had been swirling in her mind finally found their way out. "First, they questioned my ticket at check-in, like I didn't belong there. Then at security, I had to go through unnecessary screenings. They kept questioning me, making me feel like I was doing something wrong. When I got to the gate, they told me I couldn't board and made me leave the terminal without explanation. It's like they think I don't have a right to be here just because of my name." Barack's eyes narrowed as he listened, his expression hardening with every word Sasha spoke. It was clear that he understood exactly what had been going on. He had lived with prejudice for much of his life, understood the insidious ways it could manifest. But hearing it so blatantly directed at his daughter stirred something fierce within him. Turning his gaze to the manager who had been leading the charge against Sasha, Barack raised an eyebrow. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice still calm, but now there was an undeniable authority behind it. "You told my daughter she couldn't board her flight without any valid reason?" The manager, a woman in her mid-40s, seemed momentarily caught off guard by his directness. She hesitated, looking between Sasha and the agents who had been involved. It was clear that she hadn't expected this confrontation, much less the presence of the former President of the United States. "Well, sir," she began, her voice faltering a little under the pressure, "we had concerns about her behavior. She was becoming disruptive." She tried to explain, but the words came out unconvincing, lacking any real substance. "Disruptive?" Barack repeated, his tone cool but unwavering. "I don't see how asking questions about my daughter's treatment constitutes disruption. Can you explain how a young woman attending a conference could possibly be considered disruptive just because she's being treated unfairly?" The woman opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her hesitation was telling. Barack had a way of making people realize the gravity of their actions without raising his voice. Sasha could see the doubt creep into the manager's eyes, as if she was starting to understand the full weight of what she had done. But before she could continue, one of the TSA agents, a man who had been particularly aggressive toward Sasha earlier, interrupted. His voice was laced with defensiveness, perhaps even a hint of arrogance. "We had to make judgment calls, sir," he said, crossing his arms as though justifying his earlier actions. "Sometimes things don't feel right, and we have to follow our procedures." "Things don't feel right?" Barack echoed, his voice soft but carrying a weight that made the agent step back. "Are you telling me you made a judgment call based solely on the way my daughter looks?" The agent faltered, his posture stiffening as he realized the severity of the question. His eyes darted nervously to the other TSA agent, who refused to make eye contact. The manager, once confident, now looked uncertain as well. It was as if the truth of what had transpired was slowly dawning on them. They had crossed a line, and they knew it. Barack continued, his tone now colder, more pointed. Let me make this very clear. My daughter is not leaving this airport unless she chooses to. If there is any legitimate reason she's being singled out, I expect to hear it. If not, then we will be having a very different conversation." The silence that followed was heavy, the staff unwilling to speak. Barack Obama had a way of cutting through the noise, of commanding the space with his presence and words. And in that moment, the staff had no choice but to face the reality of their actions. They had targeted Sasha not because of anything she had done, but because of assumptions made based on her background. "Is there anything else you would like to say?" Barack asked, his voice smooth and unyielding. The staff, now uncomfortable under his gaze, shuffled nervously, their previous authority slipping away. The manager swallowed hard, glancing from the agents to Barack and then back at Sasha. She cleared her throat, her voice now shaky. I apologize for the misunderstanding," she said reluctantly. "We will review the situation and ensure no further issues." The weight of the apology felt empty to Sasha. She had been humiliated, singled out, and made to feel as though she didn't belong. But hearing her father speak up for her, seeing him stand firm against the unfair treatment, allowed Sasha to finally breathe a sigh of relief. It was over. As Barack turned to leave, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let's get you on that flight," he said softly, his presence like a shield against everything that had happened. Sasha nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. Despite the injustice she had faced, she knew that, with her father by her side, nothing could break her resolve. Together they walked out of the corridor, leaving the stunned staff behind. The world outside the airport was still moving, as if nothing had happened. But for Sasha, everything had changed. Her father had shown her what true strength looked like, and it had nothing to do with titles or fame. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter who was watching. In moments of injustice, it's important to remember the power of standing up for what's right. Just like Sasha Obama, we all face challenges and obstacles, but with support, resilience, and the courage to speak out, we can overcome them. The way we handle adversity shapes who we are and how we impact those around us. This story is a reminder that, even in our toughest moments, we are not alone. If you found this story inspiring or thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that highlight strength, resilience, and standing up for what's right. We love hearing from you, so leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone stepped in to help you when you needed it most? Let's continue the conversation. Your voice matters.